Welcome to the Neurology Nuts and Bolts podcast, all about constructing your career in neurology. I'm your host, Sarah Schaefer from the Yale School of Medicine. Today, as part of the Types of Careers series, we will be speaking about telemedicine with Teria Civilis, who works for the national telemedicine company Telespecialists, and Maria Ramirez Hubbard, CEO of the Memory and Attention Research Institute of America and outpatient teleneurologist. This topic was specifically requested by a listener, so keep those topic suggestions coming. Thank you for joining us, Teresa and Maria.
Thank you for having us.
Why don't we start by both of you telling me a little bit about the background of your careers? What did you do before teleneurology? When did you make the switch, and what prompted it? Teresa, you want to go first?
Sure. And like Maria said, thank you for having us here today. It's very exciting to share telemedicine with those who are interested in learning more about it. So I actually focused on telemedicine very early on. I decided telestroke was what I wanted to base my career off of in residency. I watched the telestroke program being built in my program, and I thought it was just such an amazing way to reach all these patients in rural areas, small community hospitals that I had seen and witnessed not getting care. So I kind of went in and started my career with that thought. I was briefly in academics working on a telestroke program within the smaller system, and then switched over to being in the private practice group that I am now with Telespecialists, because it gave me an even further reach than I felt I could get in academics, being that I see patients in 35 states across the country and am able to reach so many small communities. That was a really big career pull for me, but it also really made a huge work-life balance difference, becoming shift work, not having the outpatient clinic responsibilities, the constant inbox, just really taking care of acute stroke patients and acute neurologic emergencies in that shift schedule just allowed so much more time with my family, more free time for myself, and time to build the career I want in other ways. You know, even through my group, where I'm still able to do a lot of research and education that I liked about the academic environment, but a lot less of the bureaucracy that comes along with those things. So it's been a really great transition for me.
Great. What about you, Maria?
Well, I have been on academic settings for just a few years and then moved to private practice for the last 25 plus years. I have been doing telemedicine since before it was called telemedicine. In the area I was practicing, I noticed that patients wanted to handle things over the phone. There was no readily available video conferencing then, so I instituted phone visits for a small fee. That was about 20 years ago, and that was in addition to my private practice. Fast forward, I had to relocate, and there were not many jobs when I relocated for personal reasons, so I started multiple jobs part-time. One of them was a telestroke virtual company, and then when COVID hit, I transitioned to my own private practice in telemedicine.
And how are your practices set up? Tell me about your day-to-day and how teleneurology fits into it. Maria?
All right. So I see about 6 to 8 patients per clinic day. I use a Mac computer and Plantronics headphones. I have a designated quiet, lighted space and well-suited for performing my job. I have a second internet source and battery packs for backup. And I use multiple softwares, including Doximity, Zoom, and many others. And sometimes I am flexible and I switch between softwares in the visit due to poor connectivity. I found that some of these softwares are more friendly with people that have very poor reception. And sometimes I just completely move to finish on telephone.
And what about you, Teresa? How is your day-to-day or I guess your week-to-week, how does it look as a shift inpatient teleneurologist?
Yeah, so our practice is actually technically a private practice of about 70 plus physicians now, and we have 12-hour shift coverage. Some people have some 6-hour shifts or split them up, and then with that coverage during that time, you're serving I think about 250 hospitals now. So we don't deal so much with individuals and their home internet service or those types of things, but we use just about every video conferencing platform there is, from Zoom to the Jabbers to Teledoc, and we bounce around from hospital to hospital depending on who is in need at that moment. So there are two different ways, two different shift types. One being the telestroke and the other being teleneurology, because not only do we handle the emergencies, but there's also hospitals in which we round. I currently am just doing the telestroke model. So I see stat consults, I'll see patients in status, I'll see patients with strokes, and then really it's just kind of as they come in, and it cycles through the physicians that are free. There's about 15 plus physicians that are available on a shift at a time, so that we can get a very quick response, usually under 3 minutes for strokes from when they arrive. So that makes for a little more of a sporadic schedule. You're as far as when you see patients, there's no scheduled times. We just kind of jump on when they need us, as opposed to the teleneurology model that is doing hospital rounding. And it's basically like a neurohospitalist, but via telemedicine. So they'll go from one hospital to the next and have a nurse on the ground that leads them around. And that's probably one of the other big differences in how you practice between outpatient and inpatient. Is inpatient, we always have a nurse. There's somebody to be our hands, somebody to direct, to give us other components of the exam. An obvious benefit that you don't get in that outpatient environment, because you can't necessarily have somebody in the patient's home. And in addition to the clinical parts of what we're doing there, I'm also heavily involved in our quality program, in which we work with the hospitals to improve their stroke programs, try to figure out how they can get better response times, how their treatments look, review the cases, and all those types of things, which we're work very closely with their stroke coordinators and stroke directors. So that's also, for me, a very rewarding part of my career, because not only do I get to help the patients I see, but I can also help build programs across the country and help that network for stroke care improve.
Can I ask you one clarification question? So I know you said you don't do the teleneurology, but is it literally a nurse with a computer, just dragging the computer from patient room to patient room with the neurologist on, Zoom or whatever?
Essentially, yes. I did a year of just straight teleneuro rounding, and in the hospital, as our group, we require a designated rounder, which is typically a nurse, and then the patient's nurse will be there as well. But that nurse that's rounding with us has a reflex hammer, has been trained in how to do them, knows an NIH stroke scale, knows the neuro exam. So they really could run through an exam in front of us and let us watch, and then have us chime in with what we need added and what more we want to see. So we try to have somebody who's at least more experienced helping. And yes, sometimes they take you around to 20 rooms, and that's that nurse's job for the day. Some places actually assign an NP or PA to be the one to take us around. And then you have a little bit more clinical knowledge there as well to assist with the exam and those things. So it's facility specific who they designate, but there is somebody that takes the cart around. We don't get left in random places or be passed around from nurse to nurse who doesn't know how to assist us and know the technology.
And for these acute stroke codes or acute things, is there usually an emergency medicine or inpatient hospitalist physician at the bedside assisting you with things like checking the pupils and other parts of the exam and history?
Variable on when the ER doctors jump in. Oftentimes, especially since COVID's hit, we are the first one to see the patients. There are certainly times in which I have given thrombolytics without an ER doctor have even laid eyes on them. When they were in code situations, hospitals were grossly understaffed. We really served as that separate physician that allowed that care to still occur quickly, because the ER doctors were just drowning in patients. The ideal is not that. The ideal is that the ER doctor would be close by, have laid eyes on them, but for the most part, we make the TPA decision. We have the resources without the ER doctor being present to get a good exam in history. We have EMR access, so we can see everything that the ER doctor can see. We place orders. We order the thrombolytics. We order the blood pressure meds. So there essentially isn't a need for another physician at the bedside unless there's airway issues or something that truly requires physical touch. But they obviously are kept in the loop, whether they're physically present or caring for another emergency. We let them know what's going on and work with those things.
And Maria, how does it work on the outpatient side? Do you have staff who, quote unquote, room your patients, help them with the tech aspect of things? Or are you in charge of all of those aspects of the telemedicine visit?
I have to do both. I have a contract with a huge clinic that has 52 locations, and I see all their brain injury patients, which is my subspecialty, one of my subspecialties. And they have a army of nurse practitioners, PAs, chiropractors. So they see the patient before me. They do vitals, they do history, and they make a summary for me. They even do a standard neurological exam because a lot of these nurses and neurochiropractors are trained to do this. And when I see the patient, I supplement the exam they did with parts that I more like to do better or more extended. And I go through what they already got in there and add. So yes, I do have. When I do it on my private practice, I do it from scratch, so to speak. My assistant give them the link and explain them the best practices to show up on camera, so to speak. Like, do not be driving a car. Make sure you're in a well lighted place with a good signal. So that's all that person does, and I do the rest. I do from the beginning. I have pre-filling questionnaires for them to do before they see me. So I have a lot of information before I actually see them face to face.
You would think that you wouldn't have to tell a patient not to be driving a car during a telemedicine visit, but any of us who have ever done telemedicine know that is a necessary instruction.
I know it's very, very frequent, and it's scary because there you are arguing with them. Why is it not a good idea to be in a car looking at a camera? So what I do is immediately I see them inside a car, I hang up. I don't argue with them anymore and let my assistant explain them later. That is for their own safety.
How do each of you balance virtual versus in-person evaluations of patients? Are there times when you really think that the person needs to be seen by a neurologist in person, and how does that work in terms of your own practices?
I don't see it right now in person because I'm full telemedicine, but when I did, I had days that were separate for virtual. So like Tuesday was virtual day, and that make it a lot easier because you're in a set mind of, you're in the computer. When they beginning of the COVID, I was in the clinic, and they instituted the televisits, but they had no experience with it like I did. So they insisted of alternating patients in person with televisits, and that became disastrous. So then they listened to me and started doing one day a week of televisits, or every other day, however they like it. And it worked a lot better. I think it's more coordinated that way.
And now, are there other providers that you can send patients to if you feel like they need in person, or does that not really come up in your practice?
I do. I did have a legion of doctors I can refer to through that clinic that I worked up to about 2 years ago. And then in the other settings that I work, I do have doctors that can see them. Mostly I need them for like neurosurgery, orthopedic surgery. So those doctors don't do much televisits anyway. So they like to see the patients in person. And I do have a network, and a lot of times there are things that are not too related to our practice because it's a pure brain injury practice. Sometimes we find incidental things on their studies. So I explain them that, look, I found this, but this is not brain injury related. Let's talk to your primary doctor. Let's get some referrals going. And if they are completely unknowledgeable about where to send the patient, I step in and I give them a list of doctors to tap, to call in and try to make appointments.
Teresa, what's your experience?
So being hospital-based and fully telemedicine, we do certainly have to transfer patients at times. And while I think that we handle a lot more via teleneurology than people might think, we can handle an MS exacerbation, we can handle GBS. There's a lot of things you can still do, but I have found in my experience the few instances in which I've had to transfer a patient because I wanted a neurologist in person to see them has always been for neuromuscular reasons. Sometimes you really need a good neuromuscular exam, and you can't trust somebody else's hands to do that for you. There's a lot that you can kind of push, but I've had a few very complex, very sick people that I felt needed that. And the hospital systems always have that tertiary care center that we can get them over to, but yet we can keep so many other patients in their local home community, but really neuromuscular, and if they need continuous EEG. Those are kind of the two big neurology transfers that we send for. Obviously, with telestroke, we have lots of neurointerventions, and we have a very clear network and pathway for every patient to get transferred for that. We also work with facilities that do have neurointerventionalists on site too, so they don't have to leave to get those interventions. But there are certainly, it's important to know the limitations and when it is important to get somebody in person to be able to physically touch, do the neuromuscular testing, get reflexes, things that we can't do with our own hands.
All right, Maria, Teresa already mentioned that a good neuromuscular exam can be difficult to get over telemedicine, teleneurology. Are there other aspects of the patient that make them more or less appropriate for teleneurology in your experience?
I think the only patient that I found not suitable for telemedicine or teleneurology is the hearing impaired that is not trained in sign language. It just ends up to be a shouting match, screaming and "can you hear me?" And that's the most difficult one because when they're deaf mutes, we have a interpreter come on, online with us. But that's the one that I have a challenge with. I believe that I've been able to diagnose even like core compressions just by talking to them and seeing they cannot move or I'm paralyzed from my neck down, things like that. So I believe that's, of course, I had to refer them out, but to make the initial diagnosis and decisions of what is needed, the next step for them, I've been able to do everything through either phone or telemedicine with no exceptions so far. And of course, I don't do a lot of neuromuscular per se, but this is my experience so far.
I have to say that I've also felt that movement disorders didn't work very well on telemedicine, maybe for follow-ups where you already have a good exam on the patient, but trying to differentiate sometimes between tremor and myoclonus, for example, with the telemedicine platforms and the video maybe not being quite as good as in person has made that difficult. So I don't know if either of you have done movement disorders on telemedicine, but I've found it to be challenging.
In my case, I've noticed that if it's just like a tremor, you can probably do a lot of things on the video with them, like pretend you're drinking from a cup, pick up the pencil, put your hands in front of you, touch your nose with your finger and things like that. So you can, tremors, you can probably work out. And I've diagnosed in that geriatric clinic lots of Parkinson's just through telemedicine. Of course, there is the Parkinson Plus syndromes that eventually I'll get to see them in person and work on those. But I think that you can start from basic things and more involved, like had to see them walking or doing more maneuvers. That will be more complex. And yes, definitely better seeing a movement specialist.
So Teresa has mentioned a little bit about how telemedicine has really improved access to care. What do you feel are the advantages for patients and what has your experience been in terms of access to care? Maria?
I believe that this is a tremendous improvement and sadly, COVID provided a blessing in disguise by promoting telemedicine protocols and needed software. And definitely access is a key word because the patient calls you desperately needing to see a doctor right away. You can turn on your monitor and see them. And that's such a blessing for the patient himself or herself. So it's very important that the access keeps open, so to speak, so the legislation and the insurances don't cut this from the patients, which is the trend since COVID restrictions have been lifted in many states. No longer the protection is there to see like your patient anywhere. Now you have to be licensed on the state you see the patient and the patient is sitting and where you're sitting, you have to be licensed on both. So that is the problem now with access. But in general, the access is precious to patients that live far, cannot drive. They're limited in family or friends to take them places. So access is keyword. This telemedicine provides access to everybody.
So you touched actually on what my next question is. What are important things to know about licensing and reimbursement? Teresa, you mentioned that you see patients in 35 states. I'm sure that things have changed a lot in the time of COVID and that they're still changing. I'm getting emails every couple of months about which states I can see patients in for telemedicine that have, reciprocity, even if I'm not licensed in that state. How do you think things might settle out? What are the nuts and bolts, as it were, of all of this?
So licensing, yeah, it's definitely a very complex thing. I'm very lucky in that our group has an entire team designated to our licensing and credentialing. Maintaining 35 licenses on your own, I couldn't even imagine trying to do that, and 200 plus hospital credentialings. For us, we were doing this well before COVID, and we're licensed in the state where the patient was going to be, licensed in our home state. That was kind of our standard practice. So those things haven't changed as much in a larger group like us. It's very feasible. The nice thing about during the COVID time is that some of the new licenses were COVID licensing, which were easier to get and a little bit less cumbersome of a process for our staff. Really, on the physician side of it, I felt no difference, but that's just kind of one of the benefits of having somebody doing those things for you. In my academic time, we had to deal with all those credentialing packets and all those paperwork ourselves. So I know how incredibly burdensome it is if you had to do that yourself for many states to try to provide that coverage. In terms of how it settles out, I really hope that over time we can get some more reciprocity. They are working on the universal license, in which you can kind of send out the mass applications, exists now, but there's only certain hospitals that are within that. And I know we do utilize that to try to help with some of the licensing paperwork, but it seems far more complicated, in my opinion, than it really should be. And I hope that we can get some more legislation to make it easier, because there's certain states with very few neurologists and other states that have plenty. And if we can utilize telemedicine both in and outpatient to help cover those states with less physical neurologists in them, we can really give a lot more equity to patients, which I think is really important.
And what about reimbursement? Are you paid less for a telemedicine evaluation than you would be for an in-person evaluation?
The way our structure is it, everything is telemedicine, and we don't directly go through the typical insurance channels. There's contracts with hospitals, and the hospitals are paying us based on the number of patients that we see. So there really hasn't been any change in the reimbursement model for our physician group. One of, I think, the big benefits in some of the changes with COVID is that there has started to be more telemedicine reimbursement at all. So now the hospitals can recoup some of the cost of having us see patients. Really, when you're in an inpatient model, it's a very different thought process, because if a hospital can build a stroke program and keep those patients, the hospital is going to make more money. So the cost of us as neurologists becomes less significant, even though they're paying for it separately, because they get all these hospital beds filled and all these other patients that they're now keeping and services they're providing. So it kind of allowed the maybe wealthier or better funded hospitals to afford our services. Whereas I think COVID has changed some of the payment structures. More hospitals are paying for telemedicine, and now those hospitals can bill the insurance companies and Medicare for reimbursement for our services, and it makes it so that our reach can go even further, and you can reach some even more low-income hospitals that didn't have the resources before for it.
And what's been your experience on the outpatient side over the years, Maria?
When I did it with the clinic, they wanted to know exactly how many minutes I spent with the patients. So I had the habit of starting with a phrase, a start time, and then ending over before my signature with end time, and calculating time spent, so they could bill appropriately. And now I am a per diem and also a fee-for-service person. So now I get paid a lot more to see patients. My income has immensely increased, and I don't have problems with any reimbursement because the clinic pays me, so they have to deal with the payments to them. And when I did it with the clinic, it was the same. This was I would like to say a Medicare clinic where they get some amounts of money at the end of the year. They have to bill correctly. But I also like to point out that the American Academy of Neurology has some beautiful guidelines on their website for telemedicine payment, codes, reimbursement. So I think that's a very helpful package they have in there that you can use to guide you.
Great. It's always important to give people resources that they can go to after the podcast is over.
I believe that we as neurologists are in much demand. There's not too many of us, and we have a tremendous value to offer to any practice that we go into. So we should be paid accordingly and not being offered, pennies per hour. So in my example, I'll be working in this clinic for 2 years, and I started with a certain per diem, and after 2 years, I renegotiated my contract after seeing that an ad has been placed for new neurologists and nobody was taking the job. So I still was the only one doing the majority of the work, and I figured out that I was very valuable to this clinic. So I renegotiated my increase in salary or per diem. And that was something that went really very smooth. And I've never been shy of asking my value. And this was very smooth. Just a couple of trying to haggle down the price, but I said, look, this is it. So within a day, my new contract was ready. So I can tell you that you are valuable. We are needed. And we have to demand and be firm about our needs too.
And it's important to realize there is this stereotype that telemedicine pays less. And the telestroke world, that is absolutely not true. And if you are getting paid less than you paid in person, then you're working in the wrong place. Going from an academic vascular neurologist to a full-time telestroke physician, I am making substantially more money and for a much better quality of life. So making that assumption that because you're not physically present, that brings down your value, it's just absolutely not true.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask how teleneurology affects your qualities of life for both of you. Teresa, you touched on this a little bit.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's been a huge plus. I feel like my work-life balance has dramatically improved. Being a vascular neurologist and a stroke doctor, we sit around waiting for strokes sometimes in hospitals. I can remember many resident shifts and fellowship shifts where you're just sitting waiting for patients to show up. Now, during that time where I'm waiting for a stroke patient to be ready for me or come in, I can go out and see my kids. I can do stuff around my house. You're right there. You can see patients within minutes that you kind of have that freedom to do those things. And also as I had mentioned before, I think the shift work aspect of it really is of benefit for me because you have starting and ending times. It's so easy to get caught up in the world of medicine and forget to have your own life and just go on to the next thing and the next thing. The shift kind of gives you a finite time of it's time for me to put this aside and go back to my life and other things and not just let your life be all about medicine. It also gives the ability to travel. Being licensed in so many states, as we mentioned, you have to physically be in a state that you're licensed in, but I have a lot of freedom to go different places. As long as I have good internet and a quiet space, I can really work from anywhere. Prior to the pandemic, that year before, I was in 10 different states with my little kids traveling around and seeing all our family and doing different things because my job allowed me the freedom to do that and be in different places. So, while I think it's not necessarily for everybody, some people really do want that hand-on, long-term patient relationships that I don't have the ability to have. And sometimes you certainly do miss that. But for me, I think the freedom, the benefits of my time is just so significant, especially being a mom of 2 young kids right now. The years with them are just absolutely priceless. And I think this career option has allowed me to just be so much more present than I would have been had I stayed in academics.
And Maria, what has been your experience?
I like to say that what Teresa said is very important, and in general, neurology and other medical careers, doctors feel attached to their jobs, even guilty if they don't do more. And I always been very strict about my personal time. So when I was in solo practice in Texas for 20 some years, I had a paper or agreement that patients will sign that I'm a solo doctor and these are my hours. And after hours, unfortunately, they have to go to, if they cannot wait till the next day, they have to exercise good judgment and go to the emergency room they need to. So I always protected that time, especially because I have a special needs family. So I cannot stress more than we as neurologists, as women, need to put those boundaries in place and say, this is the time where we disconnect and we're ourselves. With our family. We are with I like to read, so I need time to read. So those are the things that we need to set boundaries for. And then in terms of teleneurology, increasing my quality of life, definitely. My lifestyle has improved. I have more flexibility. I put my own hours and my own days that I'm going to work. Sometimes I only work 3 half days per week. So it's given me a lot of time for, again, my special needs family that needs many other appointments elsewhere, and provides me that time, that quality time, also for traveling. Like Teresa said, there's nothing better for me and for the people like traveling and seeing all the things, and why not? You can do a little half morning of work that day and not miss so much of work, because many of us don't work, don't get paid, right? So I think that teleneurology is such an asset and an improvement of quality of life to anybody. And I will encourage everybody to try to accommodate this in their practices.
Maria, you gave the AAN as a potential resource for people who might have an interest in teleneurology. Do you have any other advice or resources that you want to share with the audience?
I did take this course. It had no CME, but Cornell has a telemedicine course, and it's 2 weeks hands-on. You're not all day the 2 weeks. It's in your spare time, but it takes 2 weeks, and you have a lot of exercises to do that makes you think about the way you practice your telemedicine, even from taking pictures of yourself in front of the computer, and that it should show your head and the upper part of your torso, and that your ID needs to be clearly visible to the patient. And I never thought about that. I always thought of myself, oh, everybody knows me, But no, there's people that just met you that first time. So that's important for them, and so on and so forth. Little things. I thought I was going to know all and waste my time, but I think it was a great class I took. And I even also had to do like fake patients. So I had to, I have friends that will do it with me. We do a fake telemedicine visit, and I will have to send that for evaluation. And they will provide you feedback. And then we have like when we see each other, and we gave feedback to each other. So it was a very interesting course. And there's a lot of telemedicine courses out there. They are not all hands-on or workshops, but they are something very good to read, or, get a one or have CME there. And I wish the Academy of Neurology will have something like that, a workshop for telemedicine, so people will lose that little apprehension maybe that they have towards telemedicine.
Teresa, do you have anything to add?
I haven't personally done any of those workshops, but they do sound very interesting. I may have to take a look into them. But another place that does have a lot of good resources is the American Telemedicine Association. They have a great website with a lot of things on there, in addition to the AAN one that was already mentioned as well. So there's certainly a lot out there if you're looking for it, but I don't think there's anything quite short of actually doing it. For those that are interested in it, finding an opportunity to shadow or to be able to observe how telemedicine works is really crucial in my mind, in order to see if it's gonna be a good fit for you.
Thank you very much to both of you for sharing your experiences with us today.
Thank you for having us. It was great talking.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Neurology Nuts and Bolts podcast was created and produced by myself, Sarah Schaefer. This podcast is not recorded as an official podcast of any institution or organization. The podcast is unfunded. Opinions are those of the individual participants. Music by Audrey Nass, artwork by Shivani Ghoshal. Want more content like this? Be sure to subscribe to the Neurology Nuts and Bolts podcast wherever you get your podcasts to hear more about constructing your career in neurology. Follow us on Twitter at NeuroBolts and on Facebook at Neurology Nuts and Bolts to stay up to date on new content and give us feedback on what you want to hear, and tell your friends. Thanks for joining us.